Kia ora, good morning. Welcome along, everybody. For those of you still out there filling yourselves up on coffee and fruit platters and other delicious, delectable delights at this time in the morning, thank you very much for being here. There are tables down the front, believe it or not. This is kind of like one of those school assembly setups, so we will be calling you out from down the back. If you're trying to sneak out, there's a MediaWorks table down the back there looking very delinquent. Big Sammy Walsh there. Look at that. Not enough time for hugging, bit more time for sitting.
Do you think they think it's like a stand-up gig and then you get roasted in the front row?
I think we should roast the people in the back, and that will fall squarely on your shoulders.
Can I just say, Jake, you came out quite hot on stage and I just had a Mentos, so if I could just have a moment to finish it. You, Phil.
Yes, okay.
Chewier than I expected. I was wanting fresh breath, but I was really working through it. I've got tight teeth. Hang on.
You can tell we love audio. You know, we're professionals when it comes to being behind a microphone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Reeve. In the afternoons, I sit with my good friend Duncan Haidt. Did you pull it out and put it on the lectern?
No, I just swallowed it raw. I just like that.
In the afternoons, you'll possibly hear me on the Rock Drive with Duncan Haidt, my good friend. And then if you are of questionable character, you possibly listen to our podcast called Not For Radio, which is exactly what it says it is on the can.
Great, and I'm Hayley Sproull. You'll hear me in the mornings. I think, oh no, we're off here now. Bit of radio magic there. On Fleshfoot and Hayley at ZM. And I also have a questionable podcast called Sex.Life with sexologist Morgan Penn. That is actually a new episode today.
Quick show of hands who's been listening to Sex.Life.
Hell yeah.
Better. That is much better. Just put your hand up if you didn't put your hand up then.
You've got to.
That's weak.
I can't believe a woman put her hand up and isn't listening to Sex.Life.
Gracious me. You will though?
Listen.
Okay.
It's honestly, it's insane. Do you reckon we've got the two most sort of like questionable, dubious podcasts in New Zealand?
I'm quickly beginning to think this may be more of a punishment, us being up here for doing said podcast, than actually for our skill set. But anywho, we are here to celebrate everything that is audio as Ringo and the rest of the team slowly filter in. Thanks, mate. Great of you to join us.
Wow, the sass.
I know. It's just we're just jabbing the.
Do you know what? I was in charge of the clicker.
Yes.
Boom. That's us.
That's us.
Too beautiful for audio, I'd say. But I used to host a lot of TV, and they all got cancelled. Am I the ingredient? Who knows? Who knows?
Today is focusing heavily on media. On audio within media, and as we said before, radio and podcasting. And I think for the most part, as we were talking before we jumped up here, that there was a thought process that they had to be mutually exclusive, that they were going to cannibalize one another. And I think there was a little bit of hesitancy within the industry to sort of push one over the other. But I think with both sides of the fence being rather progressive in their approach, and they've now seen that it is all-encompassing and it does grow both both audiences, and it does tip into one another quite nicely as well. We'll showcase that, and we'll get a great panel up here later on, as well as some top-notch research coming straight out of the United States of America and New Zealand to back that up.
Yeah, I think what I love most about audio, which is I'm only in my fourth year of being a radio galley and a podcaster, but I love just how direct it is to the listener. And I have so many people come up to me on the street and they're like, "Hayley, how's your cat?" And I'm like, I've forgotten where I've met you, or like, did we go to school together? But no, they're listening, they're invested in you, they feel like they know you. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just love how direct it is, as opposed to sort of like behind a screen or behind a wall of flowers.
And it's live as well. The live element will never, ever, ever be able to be replicated in any other format. I think even in television, there is a theatre of the mind. When you don't have our devilishly good looks to fall back upon, in radio, you really have to paint a picture, take people along on that journey. And you're with people in their most sort of vulnerable states. Every single morning, there are naked people listening to Hayley when she is talking. And I'm not entirely sure.
And then I like to think they end the day naked listening to Sex.Life as well. Yes. Start and end the day with Hayley naked.
Which is a great slogan.
Which is the name of my new podcast.
A great slogan in itself. But it is, you are with people in their cars, you are with them in their homes, you brighten up their days, you drive them in certain directions, you introduce them to new brands and new concepts. And that's a really, really, really important role within society. And we take it really seriously, as you can tell.
I feel like you could have put on like a proper shirt. We've got to see. Your sunglasses are literally hanging around your neck. I wore sparkles. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, my wife told me I look like a rock dancer off Timu, which is...
It is quite a pant. Is it intentionally too short?
Nah, just quite tall.
Yeah, right.
6'6" for those down the back that can't quite see.
That is not true, because I'm 5'10", and I'm just for comparison... bit of that's bullshit.
Jeez. See, once again, theatre of the mind. It's what we sell. If you'd like to see what it's going to look like today, Hayley's in charge of the clicker.
Boom!
Boom! There it is.
That's the plan. We're not here for long, are we?
No. We'll get into it, shall we?
Yeah.
First up, we've got the Infinite Dial presentation. Dialing in from out of the United States is the one and only Larry Rosin, and all the way from, I think it's Ponsonby, Grey Lynn, is Alistair Jamison, the CEO of the Radio Bureau. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands
Give them a round of
together
applause.
for these hammered hunks.
Morena, nice to see you all. Thank you for making the time to come out this morning. I know it's cold and neither of the escalators are working, so I appreciate it. That's great. It's amazing to see so many people here. There is, as Jay said, a bit of room at the front if you want to push forward. Dialing in from the other side of the world, we have Larry, and he's wishing he was here. Every time I talk to him, he suggests that perhaps delivering this presentation in person would be a much better idea, but we haven't quite managed to get that past the financial people as yet. Anyway, we're here today to talk about Infinite Dial, and the plan for today is to quite quickly whip through some of the headlines from the latest version of Infinite Dial. For those of you that have seen this before, this is actually the third version that we've done here in NZ. For those that don't know, Infinite Dial is the longest running survey of its type. It's been running, Larry will correct me, 20 odd years at least in the States. And it kind of is one of the few things that can give us a total view of audio consumption across the board and some kind of trended data. The point I would note is it's not, it's just one source of information. So we've got GfK, they're going to chat to us a bit later. I would encourage you to look at this and also continue to use the currency data and the other sources of information that you have to get a kind of complete picture of audience. But we hope out of today you'll get a really good sense of what's going on. I'm going to chat through only a couple of slides. Larry's going to do the bulk of the presentation, and then I'll come back and do some observations. The final thing I'd say before we get into it is there's a whole bunch of other data that's obviously not covered today. So if anything piques your interest, then talk to someone and we will dig it out and share it with you. So sound good? Awesome. So as I said, I'm just going to do a very quick bit of setup, which is around total audio landscape or total landscape in some ways, and then I'll pass to Larry to do the meat and drink of it. But we thought we'd just start with this. So we asked this question last year, which is in essence asking people what they have consumed in the last week. And I guess the headline here is that when you look at 2025, total audio is now the highest consumed channel across the country. Total audio includes online streaming, radio, live radio, catch-up, podcasts. So it is a catch-all of all audio, and I guess at 94%, you'd argue that's pretty much everybody. I think the other point of note on this chart is you can see there's a little bit of a decline in social, and that's sort of a bit similar to what we're seeing with some of the global platform numbers as well. So there's a hint that some of the kind of the global appeal might be coming back a bit. I wouldn't take that as read, but as you see the numbers as we go through, I think it'll give you a little bit of a sense that there's a general decline in that area. We have included YouTube because you'll see that YouTube features quite heavily through the kind of the content that we have today. I think the kind of key point on that is total audio is growing because our kind of two fundamental formats are delivering growth as well. So you can see from this chart that radio continues to be incredibly resilient, and that's radio in all its forms. But you can see there that there's actually been sort of a bit of growth there. And probably no surprise to any of us, we're continuing to see growth in audiences of podcasts. And we've got a couple of different measures on that today, but also we have a bunch of other sort of data as well that sort of supports that. So yeah, I think the key takeaway on this is that both formats working well and driving total audio consumption and And obviously now we can claim that more people listen to audio in a week than consume any other channel. The final chart in this setup was really just to look at it by age, and we can see that that the kind of core of that growth is actually coming out of radio through the sort of Middle Ages. This chart's here in part because we're going to talk to age a bit, as we have in the last year, as we go through it, and just sort of try to show the sort of strengths of the different formats across the different age groups. That's it from a landscape point of view. Larry's going to pick it up from here. I'm going to stand here like a weirdo because I'm in charge of the clicker. Unless, do you want to do it?
Oh, I trust you.
Okay.
Doing great so far.
So, thank God. So yes, Larry, welcome.
Yes. Hello, good morning to all of you. Good afternoon from here in New Jersey, where it's still yesterday. I'm excited to be with you and walk you through the data. There's a panel later where we can handle any questions that might come up. Before I launch off here, I do want to thank the sponsors for bringing this to you. And I also want to very much thank Alistair, who's been just so great to work with and getting this all organized. So with that, I'll start going through the data, and this will essentially go into more detail of some of the highlights that Alistair already has shown. But here is our numbers for listening to live radio. Your numbers in New Zealand are on the right-hand side of this graph, and they can be compared to studies we have from the US and Australia. So starting with US, you'll see that our estimate for radio listening in the US is significantly lower than our estimate for you. They're 10 percentage points lower. I do want to point out that Australia is doing infinite dial again this year, as they have now for many years. But we're not presenting that for just a couple more days. So we can't include the Australian numbers just yet. We will update this deck with the Australian numbers just in a couple days when those go public. But you can see that the numbers are a bit higher in Australia by comparison, but still a strong majority of the New Zealand population listening to live radio every week. This is that same information. On this graph, it's all New Zealand data. And this graph is showing it by the broad age groups. And you see the numbers 35 plus are extremely high, and they actually went up a little bit among, for our estimate, among 35, 54-year-olds. We are seeing a little decline among the younger people in our samples, 16 to 34, but it's still, a majority of everyone listening in that age group as well, listening to live radio in the last week. Number much higher than our American estimate. One of the reasons radio remains so resilient and successful is it remains just totally linked for so many people with the in-car environment. We asked people who have been in a car in the last month, which is most of the sample, which of these audio sources do they use? And you see that by far AM/FM radio is the top choice, with nearly 3 out of every 4 people saying they use the radio in the car, and all the other numbers significantly lower. There is some people streaming or using digital files, perhaps, that they have on their phone in the while in the car. You still see 29% listening to CDs in the car. I don't know off the top of my head the average age of a car in New Zealand, but until probably just a couple of years ago, virtually all cars would have had CD players in them, and so people, just under a third of people continue to use those, but. The main point of this graph is that radio is the dominant thing that people use in their cars on a daily basis. The other thing to point out is how much higher listening to radio is as compared to the ad-supported parts of Spotify or YouTube Music. So here we're asking, have you listened to ad-supported Spotify, ad-supported YouTube Music, or any FM radio in the last week? And you see that the reach of radio, the audience that's available to advertisers from radio on the right-hand side here is just vastly higher than what is being delivered by the ad-supported parts of Spotify or YouTube Music. And in fact, all three actually tipped down just a bit from our last study in 2023, which is in particular, the Spotify number is counter to what we see in the States, where it has continued to grow even among the ad-supported. So it's an interesting story in New Zealand and you just see how much reach is available to advertisers from AM/FM radio. But one of the great things about these surveys is it shows exactly the point that the MCs made, which is even as new options have proliferated and people have new ways to listen to audio, they continue to just add to their audio diet as opposed to deleting something to add something new. So one of those aspects is any form of online audio, which is listening to the streams of radio stations or listening to pure plays like Spotify and YouTube Music and things I talked about before. And our estimate for this time in New Zealand is essentially the same as it was in the last two studies. So we've gotten a 77, a 77, and now a 76, which statistically speaking is the same thing. Possibly as big as the number is going to get, maybe new things will come along to send that number higher yet. It's not significantly lower than our estimates in the US and Australia, but it is a bit lower than our estimates in those two other markets. So, very stable numbers and a very large majority of people in New Zealand age 16 and older listening to some online audio every month. And this is the same numbers by age groups. And you really see the story is there's not much of a story. The numbers are very stable, some small shifts in these more narrow estimates, but essentially the same across the age groups, with virtually all 16 to 34s consuming online audio in some fashion each month. Higher estimate this time for 35-54s compared to last time, and essentially a stable estimate, a little bit lower among 55 plus. One really interesting finding from the study, I sort of hinted at it a bit before, is we asked about specific online audio platforms. And this is trended from the 2023 study. So the blue is the 2023 and the pinkish color is 2025. And you see that virtually all of the global platforms showed some decline in our estimate for usage on a monthly basis as compared to that previous study. But you see that iHeartRadio actually tipped up a couple points. Rova is flat as compared to the others, but Spotify Premium down a point, Spotify ad-supported down a point, YouTube ad-supported down 4 points. So it's an interesting story, and it shows that people are still, I think, looking into new options, trying new options, and maybe changing a little bit their pattern of what they're choosing. So if anyone said that what they listened to the most was an ad-supported audio platform, we said which one to use the most. And this one is also quite interesting. You see the previous estimate on top in 2023 and now our new estimate. And you see that the percentage of people who selected a New Zealand-based platform the most rose very dramatically. So if you combine the iHeart and Rova numbers from 2023, it added to 18%. Now our estimate is 28%. So a huge 10-point increase. The big driver that is the iHeartRadio number. But you see that the local options to New Zealand seem to have really started to penetrate in bigger numbers. And the estimates for all the other ad-supported options did decline. So this is really one to watch and a really positive story, I think, for local New Zealand business. This is now the current data only looked at by age groups. And you see that the combined estimates for iHeartRadio and Rova, a little smaller, 16 to 34, but very significant, 35, 54, and 55 plus. So you see they are clearly a factor, especially among that older age group. Spotify stronger among 16 and 34, but definitely being carved into, according to these estimates, over the age of 35. So our MCs were talking about podcasting, and right off the bat here, we have a very positive story for the podcasting industry in New Zealand. You see that between our first study and second study, there was a large gain in people saying they listen to podcasts from 39% to 46%. And we have this time with a little bit bigger time gap, but another huge gain, this time 9 percentage points, up to 55% of Kiwis saying that in the month before we contacted them, they had listened to a podcast. So a significant number. And we can compare that to our international estimates on the next page. And you see that 55 that we got for New Zealand is exactly the same as our estimate for the United States, which was also 55% from this year. And we'll be putting out the Australian number, like I said, in just a matter of days. But you see that your current estimate is well above the last year estimate that we have in Australia. So you're right there with our numbers in the United States, and you're, higher. We also recently put out a UK estimate, which was a bit lower. So you're higher than them as well. So a significant number of people in New Zealand listening. Go ahead, Alistair, thanks. So how did we get to that? We did make a little change in our calculus this year because such a huge change is happening, which is a lot of people are now telling us that they are consuming podcasts on visual media, particular YouTube, but also now Spotify has a solution for that as well. And there's other options on top of that. So if we merely ask about listening to a podcast, the number is 47%. But this time we also asked about, have you watched a podcast? And 35% of people in New Zealand, 16 and older, said yes to that. So if you take those two numbers and you combine them, but take out anyone who said yes to both, that's where you get that total estimate of 55%, with about 8% of people saying watched but not listened. So consumed in some fashion a podcast. And so as people encounter podcasts in more ways, in more locations, more and more people are adopting the medium, and we're now up to 55%, a clear majority of people in New Zealand saying they've listened to a podcast in the last month. Those increases were consistent across all age groups this time. You see that now 71% of 16 to 34-year-olds saying they've listened to a podcast, 58%, a large jump among 35-54, and a 6-point jump among 55 plus. So you can really see that since the last study was done in 2023, a lot of people are now adopting this new channel of audio consumption. And even the two MCs talking about their podcasts, my sense is that there's a lot more homegrown New Zealand-based podcasts. So there's going to be a lot more content that speaks more directly, more relevantly to people in your country. And surely that is part of the reason. There's many reasons, but that's part of the reason that these numbers have really grown so significantly. So a couple other items that we'll go through here. One is smart speakers. In each of our studies now, your percentage, the percentage of people in New Zealand who say they own a smart speaker, again, that's over on the right, has lagged behind our estimates for the US and Australia. And we got the exact same estimate as we got in our last study of 2023, at 22% of Kiwis now owning one, same as we got a couple years ago. You will see that while that is lower than our American estimate, it mirrors the fact that our estimates there have essentially stalled out as well. Now, Amazon is making a lot of announcements coming up about new versions of their smart speakers, and they are very committed to trying to sort of rekindle the excitement around smart speakers. But there's definitely been a plateauing of these numbers, and again, at a relatively low number as compared to the other two countries here on the graph in New Zealand. But if you do own a smart speaker, and that's the people in yellow, as compared to the total, you see that people do listen to all forms of audio more. So what you can see on this graph is that every yellow bar is taller than every pink bar. So the people who do own smart speakers clearly are telling us that they listen to more consumption. They consume more audio in one way or the other. And obviously, there's probably cuts in both ways. People who get smart speakers probably start to consume more audio. But by the same token, people who are more excited about audio and more interested in listening to audio probably are more likely to acquire a smart speaker. So even though your numbers are a little bit lower as compared to the US and Australia, it's still a super important channel, super important platform for audio consumption, and something anyone in the audio business has to take very seriously. And then lastly, we have some data about in-car that I've touched on a bit, and Alistair did as well. But here we're comparing our numbers for consuming in the car, which we showed you earlier, to the US numbers. And the one thing that is interesting here is while the AM/FM radio number is essentially the same, a couple points different. In the US, online has been adopted in the car, at least among some people, in a much higher number. That's the main differential that we see here. The CD number a little lower in the United States. Perhaps our average age of car is a little bit lower. We get real winter, unlike your winter, and so cars do often not last as long here as a result. So you may have older cars on average than we do, which might explain why your CD number is a little bit higher, and may explain why the online audio number is a little bit lower. But the numbers are similar to what we see in the United States, but there is more catching up, if you will, that the New Zealand in-car market can do with regard to streaming into the car, as well as listening to over-the-air channels of content. And what we see in the United States is that similar story to what I said before, that just because people start streaming into the car doesn't mean they stop listening to the radio in the car. The evidence is that they just add that to the diet, and they choose different things at different times, but they don't eliminate things, typically, is what we've seen. One of the things that is changing is the ability to have these new interfaces in the car via your phone, Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. And you can see our numbers in the United States, 40% of people saying they have, this doesn't mean they use them, but they have them in their car. Our estimate from last time, this is the 2024 estimate, in Australia was 44%, even higher. And your estimate this year is again lower, 31%. So again, it may be that people are just driving older cars in New Zealand, or for whatever reason, they're less likely to have these new technologies in their cars. But that's one to continue tracking, because we do see that people who have them do often use them. And this makes the point yet again that I was making earlier, is as people have more options in the car, there's just no evidence that they stop using things. They just add more things to their diet. And here's what we can see here. Among Kiwis who have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto in their car, they said they are more likely to listen to everything, with the exception of the CD player, which makes sense. They're obviously the people driving on, in general, newer cars. So higher for AM/FM radio, higher for their own playlists, higher for online audio, and significantly higher for podcasts. So as people adopt these technologies, they just expand what they're choosing, and choosing more different things. But as you can see here, there's no evidence that they're eliminating things from their audio consumption. So that's a quick tour through the data. As Alistair said earlier, there's tons more, and we are happy to share and try to get you the answers to whatever questions you have. But I will now kick it back to Alistair with some general thoughts about the results.
Thanks, Larry. So I'll just really quickly run through a couple of sort of highlight observations out of that. There is a truckload of data, and there's a truckload that we haven't shared today. We can cut it by week. We can cut it a bunch of different ways. So if you need anything, shout. But I think, obviously 94% of Kiwis using audio in any given week is a headline for us. And I think that does demonstrate that the range of formats, the content that people like these two are creating on a daily basis continues to be incredibly relevant and engage with Kiwis, and that on an ongoing basis is creating opportunities for advertisers and for brands, and it continues to proliferate. I think the live radio thing is worth reinforcing. It is still a huge part of what we do because it is a huge part of what people are consuming, and that is driven by car. It is driven by a range of other things. But I think in a world where, and I can see Tyndall in the corner of my eye over there, and he loves this chart. But the fact that reach continues to be a problem in the market in which we operate, and radio continues to deliver reach really efficiently on a day-to-day basis should not be forgotten, even though, even in a world of change, radio keeps delivering day in, day out. I think the commercial audience thing is something we still have to keep an eye on, and we should continue to think about. And the fact that we are seeing declines in the ability to get to commercially available audiences on the platforms, I think is interesting in the study today. And the fact that we are seeing growth in the local platforms, iHeart, New Rover, obviously in market. I think also, and I said this last time, the fact that there are people on the ground creating content that can support brands in local market and then deliver it to a connected platform is a really powerful point of difference for us in this market, and I'm not sure we've truly unlocked that opportunity as yet. Podcast just keeps growing, continues in growth. 71% of people under 34 using it on a monthly basis, more than half on a weekly basis. It is a juggernaut. There's massive opportunity in it. But I do think the multi-format thing is interesting too, if you think about how that can be used, the ways that the visual element of that may start to play in with what we do, the fact that it's reach extending through other platforms. I think we would all agree that the kind of commercial revenue going into podcasts at the moment is solid, but could be a lot stronger, and there's still huge opportunity in it. And then the other point is all our formats are working. Radio's working, podcasts are working. They're not eating each other. It's growing incrementally. It allows us to grow incremental audience. It allows us to engage with consumers in different ways. I would encourage you all to be thinking about the different formats in different ways, in the way that you can actually use it in a cohesive and powerful sort of fully audio planned way. And finally, I think, through, and we've touched on it only lightly, there are, let's be honest, radio younger perhaps isn't as strong as it used to be, but we're filling it in with other formats. Overall, radio remains really strong. Overall, podcast is strong, but there are pockets of strength depending on the target that you're looking at. So again, I think thinking about audio first planning, how you're using the channel, what the opportunities are, to kind of truly leverage the strength of each of those formats, accepting that all of them are powerful, is a massive opportunity for all of us in this room. So that's us for the content. We're now I'm going to hand back to you.
Yeah, I was going to say, we cut our lunch hour. Thanks very much, mate. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for Al and Larry. It's probably worth noting, for those of you that don't know, Larry has been doing this since 1998, and he's seen every single iteration and all of the changes, and there probably hasn't been a more rampant change than in probably the last 10 years. And so for him and his team being absolute data pigs, munching every single number that there is out there, crunching it, and then being able to bring it back to us. And
sorry, with respect,
yeah,
data
with
pig.
respect, yeah.
Respectfully,
Yeah.
a data pig.
It's awesome to be able to have him here. We're very lucky to have him working so closely with Al as well, because without those numbers, it's very hard to direct where we are sort of focusing our energy. radio, and a lot of you in this room would have remembered when radio was just hyper-regionalised. You'd have your breakfast show and your drive show, and it would be sausage sizzles at the park and rugby on Saturdays and that sort of stuff. And then it sort of expanded out further. There'd be a North Island, and then there was domestic radio. And now our domestic product is now an international product as well. So being able to traverse that entire landscape, but not only the radio network, we've got at the moment with the new Rover app, we're getting phone calls as a part of our show from Fort Worth, Texas, from the UK, and from Oman, where Hayley was teaching people how to march in the army.
It's too big of a story to get into.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like data like that, it's so readable, you can understand it, because without that, all we have to go off is the text machine, which, by the way, is not a machine, it's just a website, and it's just live constantly, and your listeners are always messaging in. So if I say, like, me and Jay, the text machine will be like, Jay and I, correcting you on your grammar, or this song sucks, or anything. So you're like, oh, people are listening. There's the data for us, but that's much more understandable. So thank you, Data Pig.
Thank you very, very much.
Really great.
And obviously, after all of that data, we need to sort of crunch that and put it into a real life sense
I know, but
as well.
can we just have obviously we're happy about it as people who work in podcast and radio, but a moment of silence for the CD. Do you know what I mean? RIP the mix CD, and you'd burn your own. You'd go to the warehouse, you get a stack of them, and you'd lime wire them, you would Napster them, right? And you'd burn them to your own CD. I made the best mix CD once, and I'm just saying RIP. And then I had one of those like removable radios, you know, that you could like sort of steal quite easily, in my Mitsubishi Mirage 1992, also RIP. And someone stole it, and I didn't care about the radio being stolen. I cared about that CD. But RIP, good riddance.
The 4-pack CD wallet is a thing of the past.
4-pack?
Yeah, and also being able to give it a scrub up with some spit, and also the GHB that was used to clean them as well, obviously massively out of market.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then you would have a song on there that would skip, and then you learnt the song with the skip in your head. Like mine was like Elefunk by Black Eyed Peas. It was like no, 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 no. And I was like, now I know the song like that.
Can we just give a round of applause for that? That was absolutely amazing. Just glitching out. Okay, enough.
We've got an amazing panel, so let's introduce them. Well, should we do one for one?
Okay,
I think you introduce the NZME one, and I'll introduce the MediaWorks one to show peace, community.
There it is. It is.
Peace, community.
So we got them to actually write something about themselves in third person so that we could read it out. So this is going to be interesting. So first and foremost, at the end
intro, and then we'll bring you all up.
Yes.
And then we've got one round of applause.
The head of digital audio at NZME, Sarah Catran, ladies and gentlemen, an award-winning digital audio specialist. Sarah has nearly 25 years of experience across New Zealand and the UK. I don't believe it for a second. You start when you're 6 years old, surely. She's led commercial and content roles within NZME since 2005 and currently oversees its podcast strategy and partnerships. She's a double, not a single, but a double IAB Gold winner for Sales Excellence and Product of the Year. Ladies and gentlemen,
hold applause.
Sarah Catran.
Hold applause. We're going to do a big applause at the end.
Well, you can start walking up, though. Yeah.
No. I think we'll enter them all together like a parade.
Okay. All right, we're going to parade them. She does marching. I don't know these things.
Yeah, I feel more of a sort of organised parade. Yeah. Stay where you are. Okay, joining Sarah, Matt Headland, Chief Digital Officer for MediaWorks. Matt leads digital and digital audio strategy at MediaWorks, driving innovation and performance. Previously, Managing Director at Stuff. He helped transform commercial strategy and digital capability. His background across e-commerce, broadcast, and digital informs his expertise in audience engagement and monetization. That's Matt Headland. Pause for applause.
Wait. Very impressive, though. Are you not entertained
I'm
at this
impressed.
stage?
Are
I'm
you
excited.
not entertained?
Okay. And another Matt Heath, well-known, loved host and podcast producer and presenter from NZME. Matt is a much-loved broadcaster and writer with a gift for connecting to Kiwi audiences and international, might I add. For over a decade, he co-hosted the world-famous Matt and Jerry breakfast show on Radio Hodaki, building a loyal following through his irreverent humour and sharp reflections on everyday life. In 2003, he got the big call-up and took on a new role and a new challenge as a host of News Talk ZB afternoons. Since then, he shops at Taro Cash and drives a Saab. Hold applause. Hold for
applause. Okay, and our final panellist, Ash London, host and podcaster for MediaWorks. Ash has spent the last decade shaping the music and entertainment scene across TV, radio, digital platforms, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran. Ooh la la, ooh la la. Now, her debut novel, Love on the Air, has hit the bookshelves, marking her another career milestone for her. Now based in Aotearoa, Ash brings her signature charm and warmth to the Ash London show on More FM and her hit podcast, Hopeless Romantics. She's also set to join The Edge Breakfast, stepping in for Meg while she's on parental leave for baby number 2. Those are our panellists, and now please parade up and join
Big
applause.
round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Well done.
And we got music.
We got music. Welcome, guys. Thank you. Pick a seat, any seat. I think that would be helpful in case we forget who you are. They should be on. Have a little test.
Are these on?
Yeah, there you go. They're on. They're on. You sit down.
Okay.
Should I sit down?
Yeah, I think that's what that one's for.
Wow. Okay, this is nice. I'm moderating this, by the way, if you've forgotten. I'm Hayley Sproull. Okay, I have some questions, and then I believe at the end we might open it up to the room. Yeah.
Ooh.
Was that a shock to you?
Yeah, it's a bit of a shock.
Oh, don't be shocked. It's going to be fine. So if you guys have a question, have that in the back of your head, and then Jay, we might get you to do a bit of a run around with the microphone. Okay, the first question I have, brilliant mix of people, lots of experience on the stage. Anyone, you can start. What excites you most about your job and the opportunities of the current audio landscape?
I'll start then.
Yeah, thank you.
I've just got a full, admission here. I'm just looking at this now. When you used to work at NZME, I used to get a lot of very sensitive emails sent to me. And I've just noticed why, because you're Matt Headland, I'm Matt Heath. So,
Right.
So I was constantly getting, I've just seen them both, they're constantly getting very sensitive stuff that I didn't hand on or tell anyone about. So
was it personal or was it professional?
It was personal, there's professional, but there was insights that have helped me in my career. So, thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure, mate.
What excites me about the current audio landscape? Was that the question?
That is the question, Matt.
Well, I was at a one of our bosses' 50th the other day. I won't say his name, and he'd had a few drinks, and he said, "Do you know what's great these days, Matt? Is we can just move you around to a different microphone, and you'll talk." Which was kind of dehumanising, but what he...
Well, we've just proven it. I just gave you a microphone and look at you now.
I'm in front of a
He's
microphone right
talking.
now. I talk. But that's the great thing now. So you can do your live radio show, which is fantastic, and then they'll move you over and you're doing a podcast, and then there's a sports commentary that needs to be done. So you move up there and do that, and then there's a panel upstairs on the YouTube channel and you go and do that. So what's great about it now is if your job is talking, there's lots of different microphones for them to put you in front of to talk. And I love that.
Ash, what about you?
I kind of like that there's less space for mediocrity now because of all the data we're getting. I think maybe traditionally, people stayed in jobs too long, or there was this assumption that, yeah, they're popular, people like them, we'll keep them on. And now if you shit house, see you later. And that's a really good thing for someone, for someone like me who, well, it's true, right? I think
that's a great pull quote for this whole summer. If you're shit house,
see you later. We're getting so much data in real time. And as Hayley said, yeah, we're used to the text machine, people telling you, like you got that wrong. And often with women, they get really personal about it. That's fine. But now it's like with podcasting, with what we're doing, there's so much data. It's audience first, right? We're only doing what audiences are really liking. And if they don't like it, they'll tell you. So I think all in all, the quality of the audio we're getting across the board is so much better. And that's good for everyone.
Other Matt.
Yeah, look, I'm pretty fresh and new in my role. I've been there 3 months. But what really excited me about the opportunity was that Rover is a home-built platform that is really based in audio, and coming from a news environment, well, a couple of news environments over the years, it's really how we can hinge our content around trust. I believe that our talent and the content that we produce through all audio channels is highly trusted. And when we focus forward and look forward in terms of AI and how that's going to disrupt content, how it's going to scrape from platform, how you go onto Google now and you're led with an AI summary of content that you're looking for, you can always come back to our platforms locally and consume content that's trusted. So as we look forward 10 years, that's going to be the thing that really defines us in terms of our audience growth and keeping our audience engaged, but also from a commercial perspective. So how you can embed your brand or your message in a highly trusted environment. So that for me is the most exciting part. Rover is in its infancy, even though the brand has been around for many years, but we have some significant opportunities ahead of us to leverage our local audiences, segment those audiences in a different way from the global platforms, make sure that our data is richer, that we're telling stories that are meaningful and they're telling stories that are local, which is not what our global friends can do. So I'm very, very excited about the future.
Sarah, what's exciting you?
Personally, what's exciting me is how we build a commercial podcast network as part of a wider media supplier. It's kind of touching what Ash said about we know what's working, what's not working. How do we build this commercially viable product that's also still telling New Zealand stories as well, so where content meets commercial? And we're currently writing the textbook on that. The information overload that we get in our inboxes every day with blogs and videos and podcasts about podcasting, there's just feels like there's something new every day to learn. And what Matt is talking about is as well, how do we create this product inside our massive media suppliers that have other products that's trusted and that also tells New Zealand stories and that we know it's not crap and people are still doing it. So right now...
I believe they were a shit house, but it's fine.
I just...
Such a lady.
Thank you. So that's really exciting to me because we are writing the textbook on it, and so every day is something new. And then from a radio live streaming point of view as well, how do we smoothly transition over a long time to a digital product? And we're just learning as we're going. So this far into radio being around, and this far into our careers, having something that's so energised again and it's transforming, and we're meeting New Zealanders where they are, every day with different modalities. It's pretty incredible to be part of that transformation.
Before I joined radio, I wasn't really aware of how huge radio podcasts are. Just take out the songs.
Yours is massive, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted you to say that. No, but I honestly, that feels like part of the smooth transition, right, is making the radio show available on podcast. You can listen whenever you want.
We're making it, if you want it, we've got it for you on some form.
That's a Paul quote. Maybe better than shit house. Yeah.
I'll give it to her. It's better.
Looking at the data from Infinite Dial 25, what was your biggest takeaway when we're just looking at these numbers there?
Do you want me to go first again? Okay.
Well, it doesn't have to be in order each time, but Matt, you go.
Okay, well, the power of commercial radio excites me. I think it's great seeing that because I've worked in commercial radio a long time and I think it's a fantastic business. And, we compete against people that don't have ads and we beat them. And I've come to realise just in recent weeks, actually, after sort of not knowing this in the probably 12 years I've been in radio, but that ads are actually our superpower because, say, for example, on my new show on News Talk ZB, I'll talk for 12 minutes and then there's a break. And that break is a couple of advantages. One, it's a break for the listeners from listening to me. But secondly, it's a break to focus what you're going to do next. So I think commercial radio is just a powerful thing, and I love to see it keep going. And I think we just need to embrace the ads and go, this is something that is good, and it pays everyone's wages, and plus it increases the entertainment value for the audience, primarily from giving them a break from me.
I like that. What stood out for you, Ash?
I was really impressed by how many young people are listening to online audio, and that number was from 16, and I guess predominantly with podcasts. And for me, I think we've got a bit of a mandate, and this is going to sound a bit hippie, but I look at kind of the way that us as broadcasters have always shaped culture, and I think it's more important now than ever with young people who are jumping in to online audio. So I think that is a great reminder for us that, yes, we can entertain, but also we really inform the way society moves, and we're looking around at the world as it is right now, and it does feel a bit scary, and it is a very scary place for young people. So I think the challenge is set. How do we entertain young people where they are with content that's actually going to push us forward as a society in a positive way? I know that's not like a super salesy money thing, but I think it's a great thing to really remember. But how fantastic the young people are engaging with digital audio, that to me is really exciting.
Sarah?
I would say that the biggest takeaway that I saw was that podcast listening. So the monthly podcast listening that grew 20% was really incredible because it's a short time to grow a really decent, real decent jump there. But also we're world leading. So I think New Zealanders have always been world leading, and we pick up technology really quickly. We've also loved radio for a long time. So seeing that grow is so heartening to us, coupled with the fact that audio hasn't decreased at all. Audio is actually growing. So radio is so resilient. It's telling our stories. New Zealanders are still really keen to be reflected in what they engage with. And overall, getting to 94% for audio was just such a huge takeaway. So you've got that amazing podcast listening, which is not cannibalising radio. It just feels so strong and really secure for our futures.
Matt.
Yeah, look, the opportunity that exists for us to grow as local platforms across iHeart and Rover, the report just said to me that, one, there's a genuine love for audio, and there always has been. It is growing in terms of digital, but what it also showed was that we have a huge opportunity to move audience and move revenue from some global platforms. And as we know, throughout all media, not just audio media, but we are, as a local publisher, it is very, very important for us to tell local stories and be supported by local brands and businesses so they connect and engage better, because those internationals don't do that. So we can really, really help our local communities by growing and taking that share off those globals.
Thank you, guys. Now, before I ask, we're going to talk a bit about advertising and podcast. Larry actually has to go. So, Larry from Edison Research, thank you so much for joining us and your amazing insights. We really appreciate it. But go live your life, babe, and really appreciate it. Give it up for Larry. Thank you. Bye, Larry. Thank you. I got nervous. I was like, Larry knows he's still on the screen. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I just wanted to make him aware, but yeah, he does have to leave. But let's talk a little bit about advertising in podcasting, because, as you were saying, it's the way of the future. Sarah, how do you see that? Like, what do you see as being the biggest opportunities for advertisers in podcasting?
Yeah, so the biggest opportunity that we've got, my bullet points were like incremental reach. Straight away, we know that audio is growing, it hasn't cannibalised. So you've got reach, you've got scale. We talk to 1.3 million podcast listeners in New Zealand. Nielsen says that there's 1.58 listeners. So huge, it's a huge amount of people. The attention, we know from the Dentsu attention study, really high attention in podcasting, and also very low ad load. So the opportunity is there right now. You still have that dollar that you're putting into radio, but start thinking about audio as a whole and going, maybe I actually need to get $1.10 in here, $1.20 into here, because that dollar is still getting you all radio, but it's not getting you all audio. So that opportunity for podcasting right now is that incremental reach from a full audio perspective and a really low ad, high attention, and also we can boost it with some beautiful host reads, which have apparently 3 times better influence than a social influencer has. And then also what happens next is we can get into more integrated discussions, with Wild Secrets that we have on Sex.Life. Yeah. We've done amazing work with them in the last couple of years, and we've really been able to integrate into the show, so much so that Morgan has her own product line with them. So when we're talking about people watching and listening in different ways, also integrating into the show is very key. And no one is better set up than radio to, our integration teams have been doing this for a long time. So straight away from an advertising point of view, there is scale, there is reach, there is incremental listening moments, and then there's also that second layer of really deeper conversations to have.
Yeah, I do. I really do like the sort of personal element of advertising and podcasts. As you said with Wild Secrets, you can kind of, that the hosts aren't sort of just gun to the head, being told what to say or promote. We're really it can be really integrated and feel quite connected to the content of the podcast, which I like. Feels very genuine. Any other insights about advertising and podcasts from you three?
Yeah, look, I think it's Sarah raises some really, really good points there, and it is the future of that integration, or the future of the content waterfall, where we can create content that sits obviously within the hero content, but then those subsidiary content streams that we can monetize and incorporate brands into. And really, in the likes of Morgan and the likes of Not for Radio, is that the content mix now is as much about the hero piece, as much about subgroups and sub-communities communities, which we can deliver subscription around. We can sell merchandise, and we can do live events. And then that flips into books, and it flips into TV very quickly if we're thinking bigger and more traditionally. So that's really the challenge for us as a publisher, but also for you as the customer and the brand partner, is that we have the flexibility in audio to deliver trusted, highly engaged moments for you to commercialize, but how can we actually extend that content journey and immerse yourself with those brands? And certainly from what Morgan's done, she has built solid commercial relationships, one which is probably going to last many, many years across many, many content verticals and variants. And that is that's the unique part about podcasting and working that closely, intimately with talent.
Yeah, and very like that wild secrets. I actually went to Australia recently, and they're so invested in the podcast. They showed me around the factory. I saw some things, guys. I tell you what, at the Wild Secrets factory. But they're loving it as well. They're super passionate about it, which is exciting. Matt?
If you love the product and somehow someone's got hold of you and you've gone to the factory or you've used the product, and then you are legitimately sharing content about how great it is, then it's no longer an ad. It becomes just a passion project. Like, for example, I'm a huge fan of the F1 25 video game. And just yesterday I was looking around for a controller to set up in my room so I can play it more accurately.
Use both feet?
You've got brake and clutch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely, and accelerator.
My son has one for sale currently.
Does
so
he?
We'll talk.
What type is it? Oh, anyway.
I reckon this is off stage, guys. We're just sort of personal
The point I'm
negotiations
trying to make is if
off
someone
stage.
came up to me and said, hey, you seem like a guy that's into F1, I hear you like playing games, here's a controller, I would talk about that constantly on my podcast for months and months. So is anyone here
and
in that
from the heart.
business? Yeah, no.
No. Ash, anything?
I think an important thing to remember is keeping the on-air talent or the host as part of these conversations. Like, I've got 15 years in radio. If I can shoehorn, a credit line about a panty liner into a music countdown, I can pretty much integrate any sponsor into any bit of content. And like you said, if it comes from a natural point, then audiences can hear it when it's natural. So for someone like me, I love being part of those conversations. I don't mind sitting down with salespeople and figuring out how we can kind of monetize something. So I think it's a bit of an education as well, and kind of like breaking down those borders a bit between sales and content, because if we can kind of work together, we can create things that, yes, are sponsored and commercialized, but still sound great. This is what we're really good at. So use us in those conversations. Personally, I know, Hayley, you've already done it. There's so much more we can do, and this is what we're really good at. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah, I love that. Our next question may be a little bit more for Matt Headland and you, Sarah, but Infinite Dial highlights that reaching commercially available audiences on platforms like Spotify is very difficult. Why should local advertisers be looking to things like iHeart Radio and Rover to reach and engage local online audiences?
I think it's not really global versus local, it's ad-funded versus premium subscriptions. And because we have amazing global and local content on both of our apps. And what I can say is that our ad-funded product that we have, we've been priming audiences for 20, 40, I don't know how old ZB is, we've been priming audiences for decades to listen to our ads, and we do a really good job at it. We know that people are choosing us more. We've seen that in the Infinite Dial. They're turning off Spotify or they're putting premium on, and they're coming back to iHeart and Rover. So we've been priming audiences for years. We have got incremental time on there with audiences that you're not reaching when you're just thinking radio. So start thinking audio and start putting that extra spend in to get that whole audio ecosystem and that audience. I think that's really what it's down to. My fight isn't against Rover. It's probably more against Spotify, and it's against social. And I would just like people to know in New Zealand that we've got scale and we've got reach on our ad-funded platforms that we have.
Matt?
And then the other thing to add to that is that we will have a rich data set than our global competitors. So when we do, harvest our data from the people that are logging in or consuming our content, even though it is ad served, we are going to have better insights into local communities than the likes of Spotify or YouTube. Their investment in a market our size is limited. Therefore, we're going to invest more in that to be able to tell you more about the people you're trying to reach and tie that up in local stories, which those platforms can't do. So that's one way to consider us, and we're all on that data journey. We're all trying to grow those data sets. We need your help as commercial partners to be able to, combine on campaigns and make sure that we are looking to build those audiences together. So,
A question for Matt, Heath and Ash. You guys are both on air and have podcasts, because we can see in those numbers, on air is very much still at the core. Why do you think on-air radio is so resilient? And do you notice a difference between your live audience and your podcast audience?
I think radio is resilient because there's so much instability in the world, especially at the moment. I think we are being drawn to our comforts, right? And there is something comforting about listening to the radio still for all of us. So I think in one way that is a big win. I think the differences in audiences, radio, the best thing about it is that we are entertaining everybody. It's broad, it's tradies, it's mums, it's Uber drivers, and we have to find a way to entertain people from everywhere. It's not niche. But podcasting, we can be as niche as we want. I have a podcast specifically about romance books and films, and I can be very specific. I can be smutty, I can be naughty, I can say things that I would maybe say to my very best friends but wouldn't say to my mum, and yet I can magically say it at a podcast, and the comments are filthy and foul and wonderful because, women are having a moment at the moment, which is great. But the broadness of radio is totally different. So I don't see them as competitive, which is why it's not surprising to me that the two aren't cannibalising each other, and the data speaks to that.
Yeah, I think with radio, why it's live radio is still so very, very powerful and will continue to be is the jeopardy of it. Because on podcasts, you're not up against the Broadcasting Standards Authority. You can say whatever you want. Everything's on the internet. So and on radio, especially for me, just moving up to talkback radio, any caller can come through and say anything at all. So there's jeopardy for me. It's live and in the moment, anything can happen.
Properly live. You don't have this 7-second dump that I'm used to in Australia.
I didn't know about this.
I just found that out a couple months in, which is terrifying.
So I had a caller yesterday that was a complete madman, and I had to wrestle him. It was like a rodeo, just holding him on topic. We had a big altercation, and it was quite tense for me. So I imagine for the audience it was, but also there was my favourite supermarket in Auckland's burning down, and we can go live to someone out the front of it as it's happening in real time, as opposed to a podcast. You could talk about it later, and podcasts are great and have their strength. But I think the difference in radio is that live and local, and the jeopardy that it can all blow up in your face at any time.
I tell you, it is scary sometimes in the middle of your live show. If you've got a big ad break or something, we'll record a little thing for our podcast. You switch your language, you switch everything, and then you go back live on air, and every now and then you'll be like, you get this fear, very different audience. Okay, wrap-up question. I will have an infinite dial update, obviously, in a couple of years. If we're all here in I hope we are. When we're all here in a couple of years, what is it that you guys would like to be talking about? Looking ahead.
I'd like to see that continued growth into our local apps, and for when people choose ad-funded, they choose ours. That strength of radio, that resilience, I think that's not going anywhere soon, so that's always really heartening. And on a personal note, I'd like to see more women listening to podcasts and more women making podcasts for women.
Kia ora.
I'd like to see myself here on the panel again, because I always like to be recognised and noticed. And so if my career is still going well enough that I'm invited back, I'd like to see me. And I'm sure everyone would like to see more of me as well. But also, I just want to see commercial radio keep going. I love the industry. And it's just so great to see that podcasts aren't burning it. They're both growing together. And so I just think that's really hopeful for the future. So in 2 years, I just want to see both of them going up, but commercial radio going hard is so good for all of us.
I would like to see a real evolution in terms of the Rover and iHeartRadio in the way that we have ad-supported model, and we also have a subscription platform, and that we are the most trusted content platforms in the country, where we are basically amplifying as much local content and as many local stories as we possibly can. So if we can flip that graph on most of those pages, that would be really, really exciting.
Agree. Ash?
I'm new to Aotearoa and I've been working in the Australian industry for kind of 15 years. The content, the radio shows that I hear every morning, I hear them all. My husband works in content, is beyond world class. The radio shows in the mornings, in the arvos, it's unbelievable. So I want those radio shows to find a global audience because I think it's some of the best content I've ever heard, and it's not fair that the rest of the world isn't hearing them.
Ash says she's new to Aotearoa, but you still say Aotearoa better than most of the South Island. I'll say it. So that was our last official question. Does anyone in the room have a question they want to give to our panel before we wrap up?
I'm going to be rocking around the room,
with
everybody.
Mike.
So
Poised with Mike. Needs to
question.
stretch his legs.
Any questions?
Very Pedro Pascal, by
It
the
is.
way. The black,
I
that's
like
what you're
that.
going
Thank you
for.
very much.
Daddy, love
Hello,
it.
Thank you very
Daddy.
much.
Okay.
And I'd just probably take this moment as well just to thank, I guess, the bravery which is led particularly by the team that are running the digital things and, of course, the top officers at both NZME and MediaWorks for actually backing some of the thought processes in behind it as well, because you need to have some bravery. We need to shake things up. And it was a beautiful example of Sex.Life of bringing a brand on board, being able to push to it from radio as well as have it in podcast and then bring it to life in a real life product as well. That's a great example. And closer to home for us, our show sponsors Novus Glass. They put 50,000 native trees in the ground. They're really trying to make a difference in terms of these native corridors. We were able to get our audience on farm at Lake Hawea Station where we're building our own rock forest, which our listeners and their kids will be able to visit for generations to come and know that they're making a difference. Like, what we do in radio and podcast can't be done in television. It cannot be done in any other medium. So I guess a round of applause for the top brass at both NZME and at MediaWorks for actually having some bravery. And we need everybody to share that bravery as well.
Agree.
Any questions?
If we don't have any questions from the floor, I'll get you to thank our panel. Thank you so much, Ash London, Matt Headland, Matt Heath, and Sarah Catran. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
That was great. You did a great job, Hayley.
Did I do a good job?
You did
Thank
a great
you so
job.
much.
Yeah. Has anybody got a steering set for Matt, the 38-year-old kid, for his PlayStation, whatever it is he's running? Nobody?
No, genuinely, there is
Yeah.
a little thing. Really? What's the going price, Matt, for Matt? You got to do a mate's rate. Okay. Because you're actually saving on not putting it on Trade Me because they take a cut. Do you know what I mean? So just take that into consideration.
This is the connectiveness of radio that we're trying to illustrate, ladies and gentlemen. You can turn up to a conference and sit down and buy a kid's steering wheel for your own PlayStation.
We have one more thing before we have a little morning tea break, I believe.
Yes, we're going to bring up Deb Hishin, the Head of Commercial and Media Measurement Director for GfK ANZ. So every single time we get these survey results, which we all live and die by, realistically, and it's great to get those insights. Hayley spoke about it earlier on. Without these insights, we can't see what we're doing well, what we're not doing so well, and where we can improve. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage the one and only, the incomparable Deb Hishin.
Thank you, Deb.
Wow, that is a big act to follow. Thanks, Al. So, hi everyone, I'm Deb Hishon. Yes, I'm from GfK. We bring the radio ratings to this market many times a year. And I've been tasked today to talk to you about audience measurement, to talk to you about what we do globally and what we do locally here in New Zealand. So I'm going to jump straight into it. I know I am sitting between you and a warm cup of coffee, and if anyone is like me, I am freezing in here. So I'm going to start with a bit of audience participation. So all you need to do is nod your head or raise your hand. But let's start, I might just use the famous clicker. Is it okay? Yeah? Here we go. So hands up, how many of you in the room think they know exactly how radio audiences are measured globally or even here locally in New Zealand? Couple of hands. Good to see the ResCom members can say they know how radio's measured. Good, good. I did notice our table over there at GfK, the hands weren't going up. But anyway, so let's test a few assumptions. If I told you that most countries globally rely on a radio diary as their primary method of collecting audience data, would you agree? Yeah? A couple of hands up at the back, that's good. What if I said electronic measurement is the ultimate solution, that it captures everything and it's the only way forward? Do I see agreement? Nods? Okay. And who maybe in this room perceives that what we do in New Zealand for your radio measurement might not be on par with global stage? Oh, a couple of nods. Okay, let's unpack this a little bit today. I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey for the next 13 minutes, from a global perspective to what we're doing here in New Zealand. And the last few years, GFK has spent a lot of time shedding light on different ways of capturing audio audiences. We have a thorough understanding of the strengths and the limitations of each different technique, so we can bring the best and most efficient solution to a market that needs it. As part of this presentation today, I'm going to take you through some of the developments we've done over the last 18 months with our product Radio 360 and what New Zealand can benefit from these innovations. But really, why does this all matter? Why has Al asked me to talk to you about this today? Because confidence in measurement brings confidence in the medium. And we've seen with Infinite Dial, with the guys from the panel talking today, we have a lot of passion in this room about radio. We have a lot of confidence in the product we're bringing to market. So being confident in how we're measuring it drives smarter advertising, better programming, and more informed decisions. So around the world, there is not one single perfect chosen way of measuring audio. There are, in fact, 3 different ways, core different ways of measuring. Every method comes with its own cost, its own data collection, its own unique set of advantages and limitations, and it gives us the ability to tailor what we need for each market. So there are 3 core things. We have the radio listening diaries. This is what we're familiar with in this market, where participants manually record their listening over a period of a week, either on paper or electronically using an e-diary. And it's called recalled listening or awared listening. Then we have CATI, or telephone interviews. This is where you are phoned up and you are asked, in the last 24 hours, what radio stations did you listen to, for how long, what time of day, etc., etc. That's also recall, sometimes brings in lower listening levels. And then lastly, passive. Now, passive measurement is when the device the user is carrying automatically logs the audio signal. The listener doesn't have to do anything. It's opportunity to hear. But we do see big chunks of listening get missed because primarily headphone listening can't be captured by an audio device like that. So it's not the be-all and end-all for those who thought electronic measurement is probably the most perfect solution. So if we look at the global landscape, only 3 countries continue to rely solely on passive measurement. Of the 19 countries that I've popped up here on the stage, on the slide, 2/3 of them are still using radio diaries. It is the most globally accepted way of measuring audio because it captures everything. It captures streaming and it captures live radio listening. If we continue to focus on the diary markets, now I've listed here, the majority of them here are GFK markets that we run radio ratings in these countries, but I've also added in the UK and the largest US diary market, remembering the US only use meters in their bigger markets. And what I wanted to highlight here was something that people tend to see or not see, it goes unnoticed, and it's the sample ratio. This is specifically the number of respondents to population. So how many people in the survey are being represented? And the lower the sample ratio, it offers a lot of powerful advantages to a system. It gives us greater accuracy. So we reduce the margin of error and we get more confidence that we can see a cleaner picture of what people are doing. It gives us better granularity. We can zoom in on smaller groups of individuals with greater confidence. It improves representation, so we're not looking at introducing bias or anything like that within the sample. And finally, it gives us the ability to detect trends. We can see shifts in audience behaviour coming through within the sample. When we look at New Zealand compared to the other markets, yes, the sample size is 14,000 compared to Australia at 60,000, but the population is quite different. And what we see here is New Zealand has quite a low sample ratio, and that is really good. It shows high investment in the New Zealand market in our audience measurement system, and it's significant for all those reasons I mentioned. It's accurate, it gives us better granularity, and it's representative of our audiences. So now there were a few of you that nodded that said they understood how radio audiences are measured in New Zealand. Excuse me. So for those who did put their hand up and even for those who didn't, let's talk a little bit more about what we do in Australia. And New Zealand. And I really want to highlight, slip of the tongue there, the robustness and the stability of the methodology that we bring into New Zealand. We interviewed 14,200 new respondents every year. Between 25 to 50% of your sample every survey is refreshed with new respondents. At the 50% level is at the metro markets. We are in survey for 36 weeks of the year. So survey in New Zealand is business as usual for our networks. We don't see bias from station promos. You can't throw millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars at your audiences and expect to see massive spikes in your numbers. It's business as usual, 3 12-week waves, and we use rolling waves to remove any seasonal or unique event or those promotional event activity that we have coming through. And then lastly, we have been evolving the New Zealand methodology over the last few years. We've increased the online component, so these are the number of people that complete the diaries online using our e-diary, to 35% of the total sample. So it really does give New Zealand a hybrid kind of feel. So how can we be confident in the trustworthiness and the robustness of the sample? We've been doing this for 10 years in New Zealand now. And every time we look at the data before we release it to market, we constantly see consistency, not only in weekly average reach, this goes right back to 2017. Commercial radio weekly reach remains at a very similar level over the last sort of 9 years or so. But we also see it in the network shares. If we were starting to see a station that was traditionally number one, and I'm not going to name stations for various reasons, but if that station was no longer number one and they dropped to number 5 in Auckland or nationally, we would have a lack of trust in the numbers that are coming through. The sample is so refreshed, 50% of it, every survey is new, but we're still seeing consistent numbers. So the methodology is robust and it's trustworthy. We're seeing commercial time spent listening as a stable statistic in this market. And that is testament to all of the research we've already talked about with Infinite Dial. Maintaining a stable TSL in a fragmenting market is a huge achievement for the industry. But it's also important that the survey picks up on nuances in the market. So this is an example, and I don't want to give anyone any PSD or anything like that, but going back to your lockdown period in 2021, Survey 4 was actually conducted during lockdown. And we were able to significantly see a shift in behaviour straight away from the radio system that showed the decline in in-car listening because people were at home. At work remained pretty stable because if people were working from home, they were still at work. So we saw consistency in the place of listening coming through. And then as we came out of lockdown, as the markets came back into, so respondents and the population came back into the office and back in the car, we've now seen that shift return, not quite to the levels pre-COVID, but back to levels where we were before. So the sample is consistent, but it also has the ability to show change in market. So I touched on briefly markets that use multiple tools. So we, in Australia, we operate a hybrid audience measurement system where we bring in multiple data sets. Now, this is a passion project for us at GfK. We've deeply invested in this space. And our goal has always been to find the ultimate combination of research tools to bring the right solution to a market. I'm going to talk about Australia just in the next slide on what we're doing, but these are the different tools that we looked at. And one of the things that came very apparent to us when we were testing these different methodologies was the shape of day that we see people's behaviour of listening. So, you know, the peak in breakfast and then the peak in drive. Regardless of the audience measurement tool, we see the same happening in each of them. And what this does is give us confidence that we can take these different data sets and integrate them together to create a more evolved and a more digitally focused data set. And it's the insight that underpins the whole appreciation of hybrid measurement on a global stage. In terms of what we're doing in Australia, we launched Radio 360 nearly 2 years ago now. The radio diary remains the core system for us in Australia, just like it is in New Zealand. 80% of our samples done online now, 20% offline on paper. But one of the big changes that we've done is incorporate the streaming logs and the tagging data that we take directly from our participating networks. We've always captured streaming in the diaries. We do that also here in New Zealand. But what it gives us the ability to do now in Australia is provide much richer and granular data within the currency between your linear audiences and your streaming audiences. In fact, we can report that now with greater confidence and consistency every survey. We also have a wearable panel. This is something the industry in Australia wanted to see. It's used as part of the calibration, but it's not necessary to have in a hybrid system. It's just what we're using in Australia. It gives us the ability to have event audience measurement now. We can look at a particular point in time. The networks are getting access to weekly level data every week on their dashboards. And coming soon, which I will talk about on my last slide, is the CRA Audio ID, which is a tool that is going to be used across the programmatic trading platform across the industry. Now, before I go on any further, I just want to say and take a minute to say this solution isn't the solution that it would be suitable for every market. The ability that we have at GfK is understanding how we can take each of the different data sets, the digital data, the diary data, wearable data, whatever it is, bring it together to create a solution that's right for the market that we're operating in and right for the timing of the industry as well. One of the big things that came out of Radio 360 and has led us to the Audio ID project is this ability to really understand what's happening in the streaming environment. Now, networks will continue to trade on impressions for digital in Australia. We're not saying that they've got to use the currency data to trade digitally, but what this is giving them now is access to competitive level data. You can see your own digital data within your own eco-environment, but now they can see what's happening across stations. They can look at exclusivity within their own network and across other networks and within their own stations. There are proportions of listeners now that only stream. So this is a unique group of individuals that can only be reached if you advertise on the stream rather than advertising on the linear. So how do we help the industry harness this new commercial frontier or this new commercial asset? And that leads me to the Audio ID project that we're looking at in Australia. This is built off the foundation of Radio 360 because we are collecting streaming logs and we are tagging all of the radio stations. And the Audio ID is a unique industry identifier that will enable the identification of digital audiences across the participating networks and apply frequency capping in a programmatic environment. Now, we're not replacing what networks are already doing in the programmatic environment, but what we are doing is giving them the ability to do cross-network campaign optimization, frequency capping, enhanced targeting capabilities and things like that. So we are, CRA, it's a CRA's project, Commercial Radio and Audio, the industry JIC in Australia. They are talking with media agencies, DSPs, SSPs. We are working towards getting this set up in the next month or so. So hopefully it'll go live and I'll be able to give you a lot more insight on what's happened and what the results have been as we move forward with that. So my last slide, and I've got red lights flashing at me, so we'll be able to have a coffee in a minute. But what I just want to say here is, we're on a journey with the New Zealand industry around how we measure your audiences. We don't just stand still. We're always looking at different ways and different innovations that we can bring to market. I hope everyone has a much better understanding of the scale and the robustness of the system that we bring to you every survey in New Zealand. And our goal will be to continually to evolve, to embrace the digital data that's out there and see how we can bring that into the currency as well. As long as it aligns with what the market requires and needs. So in light of needing to have a coffee, stay tuned. I'll be back another day, but for now, thanks very much.
Okay, we're into the second part. We're going to have things wrapped up, we're told by Al, by just before 12, so you can head off on your traditional Wednesday long lunch at whichever fine establishment you'll be supporting.
SPQR's closed.
Yeah.
What a shame. Where do we go?
Yeah, so we'll see you all at Hopo.
Hopo?
Maybe the rooftop.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But without further ado, we're going clicking great
Bam.
stuff. Bang. Paul Sinkinson is going to join us up on stage. He's Managing Director of Analytics Partners. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. I'm really hoping that he's here. Haven't seen him.
Drum roll, play.
There he is. Yes. He promised cartwheels, but he hasn't delivered.
He wanted to do the long walk.
Yeah,
Thank you very
it's
much.
all about it.
The
Thank you very
stage is
much.
all yours. The clicker is there.
Beauty.
Wash your hands afterwards. Hayley's had it.
Nice, thank you. Thank you
Says
very
the guy
much.
who just had 2 sausage rolls.
Hey, thank you. I hear it's been an entertaining session up until now. Unfortunately, you now have a mathematician speaking to you. So hopefully it doesn't drag too much. I thought I would start by just telling you who I represent, where I come from, why I've got any credibility to be on stage here with you today. So we're a company that does marketing measurement and evaluation. So, you might know it as econometrics, market mix models. We are working out why clients sell what they sell in any week, putting an ROI to it, and then helping clients optimize that, make more money for it, right? So the ROI of every media channel is what we live and die by. We are a privately held company. We don't sell media, we don't sell tech stacks or anything else. The only thing that we do is help our clients grow so much that they hopefully keep working with us. So all of the work that we do is purely to help a client's total ROI increase, not about any particular channel. We've been doing it for a long time. We've been doing it since 2000, just celebrated our 25th anniversary. In that time, 95% client retention rate. So hopefully that's the first thing that gives you a little bit of confidence in what we're doing. I'm not telling everybody to put all of their money into Snapchat. Business results aren't going up. Sorry, you must be doing it wrong. Obviously, people would, call it on us at some point, right, and move on if the advice was completely duff. It's global. Started out of the US. It's through Europe. It's through Asia, through Australia, and through New Zealand as well. We don't actually have a New Zealand office purely because as a Kiwi, it's a trip home every time I have to come here. Otherwise, we probably would have an office here. It's also solely focused on analytics. Now, you can see, if we're going around marking everybody's report card, saying how well you're doing your job, it's only right that we should seek that out for ourselves, right? So Forrester do an evaluation, provide us in the space, what they call the Marketing Measurement Optimization Wave, called us a global leader in that since 2016. Gartner actually did a Magic Quadrant last year, called us the leader of the leaders in that as well. So it's not just my trustworthy face that you need to buy into here. There is actually somebody who's, kind of looked under the shit a little bit. Don't worry, you'll get your 50 later. In terms of, there has been somebody who's looked into it, right, and made sure that, we're not completely lying about this and that it is working. So it was a little while ago, I actually got asked in Australia, okay, if you're doing all of this work for clients and you're kind of saying how well every media channel's performing, why do you hate radio? Was pretty more or less the straight question I got. And I, kind of thought, well, we don't hate radio, it's underperforming. When I took a look at it to try and figure it out, right, I thought, this is a fair challenge. And looking across all of our norms of work, we've, obviously doing it for 25 years, we've collected loads of categories, loads of countries. There's about 900 billion worth of media spend that we've measured and optimized in this. So normally, there's a lot of norms that we can see and figure out why things are performing the way that they are. We looked into radio a little bit more and we're like, oh, wow, there's some things about the way that it's being executed that are different to other media channels that probably explains a lot of this, right? So some of the stuff that we've published over the years is things like brand messaging. Brand messaging outperforms price and performance messaging 80% of the time. Now, my background was in trading, so I always thought that brand was a little bit kumbaya, sitting around on chairs, holding hands, that sort of stuff. Turns out it's actually the biggest performer for you, right? Performs over time, means that you get that support between performance messaging from brand, 30% uplift on it, but you can see a huge lift. Now, what's the ideal mix? I know the long and the short of it gets thrown out quite a bit. I don't think it's quite that clear cut. It depends upon competitive intensity within in an industry, the margin that you're doing, how long you've been running it, for instance. But what I do know is there's a flaw. Once you get below 30% share of brand spend, you're hurting your ROIs, right? That business is not performing anywhere near that it should be. We took a look at all of the radio messaging. It's pretty more or less performance messaging. There's very, very little brand messaging, right? So what do we know? We're putting the type of message on a channel that underperforms. So of course, we're going to see some lower results come out from it, right? It naturally flows. Then we know consistency has a really big impact on ROI as well. So the more weeks that you go for, and sorry, that's really small. If you go from say, 1 to 10, and you go to 10 to 20 weeks of support behind it, ROI is up 35%. If you go to 20 weeks, it's up 60% ROI. So generally, with our clients, a big TV campaign, big online, big social, you're kind of getting there, right? And we took a look at how long term the radio campaigns were. 4 weeks. I actually sat on a panel with a brand manager who said, I really challenged my agency on this one. We went really long term, 8 weeks. 8 weeks was long term for them, right? You can see we're not getting anywhere near there. So we're doing these performance messages, these price sort of messages, where we just shout into the void with a message that's going to underperform, do it for too short a time, and we're getting lower results that come out of it. Now, the other thing that we know is that synergy is really important. This is a slide that gets used a bit. Mr. Ritson calls it one of his favorite. But as you add a media channel to a campaign, on average, the ROI increases for that campaign. Right now, that's partly because it means that you are less likely to be driving incremental reach within a channel. Obviously, if you put all of your money into one channel, right, you're getting frequency to a point, at which point it tops out, and you're just driving reach without frequency. We know that destroys ROI. If you go into another channel, you're more likely to be getting incremental reach coming through. So there's that component that plays into it, but the other component is actual synergy. So it's that magic moment of 1 and 1 equaling 3. My favorite example of that is always with out of home. So, you think of out of home playing through. It's, say, like a nice retail message. Just before you go into the supermarket, if you're thinking cereals, right? Really, really heavily price promoted category, right? So you're going in there, you're bombarded by, like all these stickers, all these price points. If you see some retail out of home just before you go in there, it can be that thing that helps you unlock that back of mind brand associations, a reason other than price to make that purchase, right? You're kind of going in there, you see Tony the Tiger, you think, I love sugary treats, maybe he's right, maybe they are great. It's another reason for you to make that purchase, right? That's the reason why you see a bigger impact, those two things working together. We're not really seeing it for radio yet. You can see it when, if you've got these massive digital results and you've got TV sitting in there and out of home, you're getting 100% of those results, right? So beautiful, big digital ROIs because they're predicated on getting the speed of reach and the quality of reach that comes from those channels, right? It takes a long time to be able to build it for digital video. You can get it really quick for social, but how many seconds of reach is it really and how many seconds of attention does it come through? If you take TV out, but you still keep out of home, you're only losing 24% of that ROI. But if you take both out, so no TV, no out-of-home support, you're losing about half the return of your campaign. So your total campaigns come down because you went chasing just digital without getting that synergy that comes through. Currently, we don't see that for radio. Now, what's different between these campaigns? There's something other than just a price message being squawked at on radio, and it runs for more than 4 weeks. That's why that synergy is coming through. The other part that we know, creative's really important. And this is where I get out of my warehouse as a mathematician, speaking to you about creative. We know, for instance, on video, 2/3 of the impact comes from the creative, right? 1/3 of it is all of those things where we have all of those big debates and discussions, what sort of audience should it be, what platform should it be, what duration, what sort of targets, all of these things, 1/3 of the ROI. Now, we know even for a static image, it's about 40% of it. If I was to be real devil's advocate and say, what's the state of radio creative on average? If I went back to the 1920s, how different would it be? Somebody in the studio reading a script. There's this the famous Borneville Watches ad, which is the first TV ad ever, right? And they use it as an example of, see, it was a radio ad. somebody reading out about it, no visual imagery on TV. But if you listen to that classic radio ad, it could be from this week, guys. We're not really leaning into it. Now, I think to myself a couple of these things, right? Back in the day, one of the largest ROIs I ever saw was from Hamish and Andy with Smith's chip. So admittedly, it started off organically, but then Smith's jumped onto it, where they were talking about what sort of chip flavor they would make, and Smith's in the end kind of made it. But if you think about it, as a medium, nothing else could have done it, right? It needed the dwell time of drive time radio. It needed it to be there the whole time, and it needed to be discussed for that length of time. So there's something sitting there that no other medium would be able to replicate, and we're still just reading a script like the 1920s. If I think about creative synergy as well, we think about using all of your distinctive assets. Think of, like McDonald's, right? The I'm loving it jingle. That gets used on radio, it gets used on digital video, it gets used on TV. You could step up from the lounge and move into make yourself a cup of coffee during an ad break, right? That jingle plays, you've been served something, right? Like that brand association's come through just because of the jingle, which, like now jingle's a bad word, we all hate jingle. But what's the number one performing distinctive asset? An audio asset. It's a jingle, guys. Now think, how long did that take to come up? Was it a long-term radio campaign of 8 weeks? Nope, not even 20 weeks, 20 years of consistency behind it. Getting that creative synergy across all of the media channels, getting that much support and that much consistency behind it, it pays off, right? There's some tremendous learnings that are sitting there from things that we're just not doing at the moment. So what is it that we can do? Well, normally at this time, I'd go into the genome and I do these for a few. We've done it for the likes of Google, TV, Meta, and we go, hey, this is what best practice looks like. And if you start doing best practice, this is the uplift that you can get. Really easy for me, be able to just interrogate the data and come up with something. But the problem, we can't do it for radio. And why? Because either best practice has been getting done for 20 years, so we can't show you the change, or there's so little best practice going on that we just can't find the data to be able to show you. Which is a little bit disappointing, right? It's become an afterthought. We're busy experimenting with social, with shiny new toys. We're not experimenting with audio. We need to come back to it. We've forgotten what it's like. If I look at the variation of TV ads, it's very small because we know the rules of how to do TV ads, right? If I look at the variation of digital ads, they used to be really big. They're getting a lot smaller now. There's all of this time spent on what's the best digital relevant content. What sort of content should you be doing on TikTok versus YouTube? Everybody's going to have an opinion and some stats behind it, right? What's the best creative that you should be doing on radio? It's quiet, right, guys? We don't have it sitting here. So we realized we're going to have to go and do some experimenting. We're going to have to get people to try different things to be able to build out the data set so that we could see what's happening. Something that we started in Australia, we did with a few clients. We did with the likes of McDonald's, we did with the likes of Woolworths. We did it across a broad range of clients. And we started to see some great results coming through. And it's becoming more and more important because TV's not able to do what it used to do, right? It used to be we didn't need to think about it because, hey, put your ad on Sunday night movies, no worries. You've reached everybody. Everybody's seen your message. We've got that synergy happening through. It's going really well for us, right? It's not happening anymore. So we're starting to see out of home, put their hand up and say for that message, hey, we can help you with that reach. We can get it for you. And you go, yep, yeah, it can. For a simple message, right? But what if it's more than 10 seconds? It's really hard to get that through, that sort of complex message through and out of home. Radio can do it. And this is where we're hoping to see radio do a synergy job. Now, is radio ever going to have the highest ROI? No. Just like TV, just like out of home, that's not its role. Its role is to do the heavy lifting and to help build the synergy for those digital channels to be able to be the cream on top and look like they've got the highest ROI. So we're hoping to see synergy come through. We're hoping to see an improvement in radio as a result of doing some experiments. That's the hope. So we've proved it out in Australia with a few clients. We wanted to test it in New Zealand. And ANZ heard us bleed on about it and stepped up to be able to do some testing. So what do we do here? We went for longer with the radio ads and a lot of work ingested into the creative. That bit that for me is kind of like voodoo science that I don't really understand, but I want to see, hey, if you really focus in on it, could you see a better result? And yeah, we did. You can see if you're really, really good with your eyesight, 50% improvement in home loans, almost 50% across business banking, 20% on brand, 30% on sponsorship. So huge improvements in the radio performance, right? So radio was working a lot better, which is exactly what you'd hope, right? Give it some focus, give it some attention, give it some love. You can see this is the first experiment that was done as well. This isn't a result of, oh, like, we tried this, we learned, we tried this, we learned, we tried this, we learned. These are the sorts of the results that are just sitting there from giving it that focus and treating it like every other media channel. But the key thing was, it's about synergy, right? It's about helping everything else improve. So when we did Meta, 10% better result from social. Immediately popped up with radio running with better creative, distinctive assets across and running for longer. Online display, 12% better performance. Online video, 11% better. Paid search, 6% better. And below the line, 3% better. So all of these things are massive results for us, right? It's where we want to be able to see floating everything as a result of it. It was the key for us to be able to see how this would lift. We expect this to get better and better because these are still off the first campaign, right? Now, what do we know about brand activity and brand campaigns? They grow over time, right? The first year, it can be okay, but after 4 years, 2.5 times higher ROI from letting a campaign wear in from going through this. So seeing this in year one is a tremendous result. We would expect these to double, if not triple, over time going through. So it's able to do that key role that TV used to do historically for us, that we were thinking out of home can. Radio is able to do it. But the key thing is it's not just the short product ads, right? If we look at it by duration, you can see product and you can see brand. Going with like 15s and 30s, going to 30s, going to 40s, going to 60s. There's potential to be able to tell a story. It's not a case of just going, hey, like how do we just come in with something that is a little zap and a little reminder. You can actually do some storytelling with this. You can actually build out a campaign and do it differently, right? You can be a Smith's chip. It doesn't just have to be somebody reading a script in the studio and doing it in 15 seconds because that's the rule. That's how radio works anymore. You can go longer and get tremendous results. Now, that's just on ANZ at the moment. We have another one, another test coming out with McDonald's New Zealand. I've seen the results as of last week. Can't share them yet because we need to take the client through it all. But what I can say is I'm happy to say that I'm talking about it on stage, right? It's strong results again that we're seeing. So in financial services, brand ads, QSR, where it's a really fast-moving product. It's supposedly all about price and about features. Treating it this way gets you the same sort of result. It comes through with great results as well. So there'll be more coming through on it, but we're seeing exactly the same trend, where if we treat radio with greater respect, we give it longer time, and something other than just a price and performance ad, we're seeing some great results come through, which we'll discuss in some detail.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Take a seat, Paul. Thank you so much for that. Really fascinating data.
Yeah, that's very impressive, but probably, if I'm not misconstruing what was just said, that just further highlights the opportunity that is available if you've got great brands, brave brands, working with amazing creative, whether it be agency or in-house, and then letting the talent bring it to life on the networks that we have. Like, it's just seems like a pretty simple approach, but once again, it needs that bravery, it needs that buy-in, it needs that passion, and it needs to be looked at differently if we want to get those 3, 4, 5x sort of numbers that we're looking at.
Yes. Okay, so should we discuss this with Paul? We've got a panel of marketing, media and creative brains. I think we'll do an intro each again, and we'll pause for applause. We'll do a small parade in which we'll applaud our panel as we did before. I'll start. Yes. Joining Paul on stage, Susan Bensonman from ANZ. Susan is Head of Media and Marketing Performance at ANZ with senior roles across public and Omnicom in her past. She now focuses on maximising marketing investment impact at one of New Zealand's biggest advertisers. Pause for applause.
You can see the sign as you drive down the motorway, and it's Hannah's. Hannah Merritt, PhD, Strategy Director, and leads the ANZ account. She's a champion for both audio within her agency and industry level, heading up the IAB's audio group to grow digital audio effectiveness, which sounds like a very hectic job.
Hectic indeed.
Pause
for applause. Finally joining Mark Lloyd, TBWA, is Mark is a Group Strategy Director at TBWA/NZ, working with some of New Zealand's biggest brands since arriving from the UK in 2023. Top of the morning to you, that's Ireland, sorry. He brings a strategic and I'm so sincerely sorry. He brings a strategic and creative perspective to the conversation, backed by his recent experience working with the ANZ team to refine the bank's approach to audio. Now, a round of applause for our panel, please.
Huzzah!
And I'm not moderating. Al, please come back to moderate this, please. That's all you. Have you got your own microphone? Yeah, he's got one. It's all warmed up. Welcome, Al. Another round of applause for Al. Thank you.
When I agreed to do this, I should have realised how good these guys would be and just left them to it. So,
not at geography though. Not at geography.
Thank you, Paul. I'm really excited about actually this conversation. Before we do get into it, I do just also want to acknowledge Suze and actually Astrid, Suze's boss. They've been amazingly sort of supportive and generous, and came to us and said, "We how can we help? We've got an important role to play in the sort of New Zealand advertising media landscape as a big advertiser, and we take it seriously. And if there's anything we can do to help," and that is sort of what has stimulated this conversation, which I would hope in the long run will have a massive benefit to all of us. So thank you to you and to the big boss. We're going to do sort of 20 minutes of chat. We did have a bit of a laugh over a sausage roll that when we talked about this on Teams, it was a fantastic conversation, and we should have just recorded that and played it down to you. So we'll see if we can't replicate it. But I thought we'd just start with with just an intro, really, which is maybe each of you can just give us all here a quick summary of your relationship with radio and audio, as both a kind of person and a professional. And sort of, your favourite station, the favourite campaign you've worked on. Any thoughts? Just kind of give us a bit of you. Yeah, let's start with you, Mr. Irishman.
Mr. Irishman. Top of the morning, everyone. There are about 6 or 7 podcasters I listen to heavily, and I would say have an almost sort of parasocial relationship with them, in that I listen to them so much I intimately know their lives, more than my own family, really. But they have no idea I exist. So that's healthy. But in a previous life, I also hosted my own radio show for a few years. So it's a medium close to my heart. It was at university in the late noughties, so it was mostly just me sort of shouting between dubstep songs, if you can call them songs. Professionally, one campaign I've loved working on recently is the Black Friday campaign with ANZ at the end of last year. So the campaign sort of aimed to promote ANZ's fraud prevention tools. And we played into the idea that scammers are as excited as everyone else about the upcoming sales, but for a more sinister reason, that it's easier to commit online fraud. But what I really loved about that campaign was it really played into radio strengths. It was a really fun, repeatable structure. And we were able to bring these sort of opposing voices, these characters of shoppers and scammers. We use these different voices and brought the story, the message, and these characters to life, I think, in a way that only radio can, especially with the scammer. The fact that you could hear the voice but not see the person really added, I guess, mirrored the danger that we were trying to talk about and really added impact to the message. So yeah, that was one that I was really proud of recently.
I think I listen to audio more than I speak to people. I have an old car, so I am always kind of flipping between my and ZM often, just depending on what I feel like. And also love Sex.Life as well. It's great, so I would highly recommend listening. From a professional point of view, I think a campaign that we worked on a couple of years ago was the F word with ANZ. It was one that we worked really closely with TWA and ANZ on around this insight that people don't like to talk about finances. And it was an insight that lent itself really nicely to audio. And so we did this huge campaign that was multi-station, it was integrated, it was also for 3 months as well. So it was a really long campaign. It was probably one of the most significant radio integrations that I've worked on, and it performed really well, and it was also just awesome to work on. So yeah.
Yeah, it was. And I didn't tell them to talk about ANZ campaigns. So my relationship with radio, so going back to the dinosaur age, I guess, when there was no Sunday morning TV, listening to Bad Jelly the Witch. And, we talk about long-term memory coding. Like, I still think about Lucy the cow quite a lot. And I actually named my daughter Lucy, which I just thought about that. And, yeah, potentially related. So I think that just shows the power of radio, and that really was about storytelling through audio that, just proves that works. In terms of campaigns, so we did some great work with NZME, who I think are here as well, on Daffodil Day last year. So, and that was about getting like all the brands to bring to life Daffodil Day and work for the Cancer Society, but do it in their own brand voice and use the talent and allow them that creativity to talk to the audiences in the way they wanted to, but collaborate in ways that they hadn't done before. So that was a really nice way that those brands all came together for that cause, which I thought was really great.
I kind of spoke about, my love of Hamish and Andy, showing my age as well when they were still on air in Australia. The campaign that I would always love to use an example other than the Smith's chip is one showing that the power of consistency that everybody else in the room would probably hate. But Frank Walker, National Tiles in Australia, is famous. It's a cult figure. It's horrible advertising. It's the CEO of the business making himself the star of the radio, but it's been going for over 20 years. And it's been off air for a while, and people still talk about it from a cult. And it just shows the power of consistency, even above creativity.
Nice. So we've got a really good mix of skills here today: media, creative, agency, mathematician, client. I thought I'd start with the first question, which is, from each of your perspectives, what do you see as the sort of main challenge faced by advertisers when using radio and digital audio as part of a campaign? And are there things in particular that you think are stopping it being used more? Might start with you, Suze.
Sure. I think sometimes we kill radio before it has a good chance to, create value. And I say that in a way that we, get amazing TV scripts where we kind of, have really charming storytelling, which we love as a client. Then when we see a radio script, we want it to be product-led, have all the T's and C's in there, and we're kind of just jamming all this product information in there. So it kind of doesn't let the idea to come to life. So I think that's one thing. And another thing is we don't have the rules around radio, as Paul talked to, which means that it's being used quite nominally. And I mean that people's bias comes into it. So sometimes people just don't like radio. So they say, I don't want to do radio, I don't like it. And there's not really the rationale that other media have to support its place on the plan. So that's why it's so good. Like Paul brought to Astrid and I the idea that there's opportunity around radio, which has meant that we've been exploring that, and I think that will bring some more robustness to it.
Paul?
I think it's a bit of an afterthought. I think the way that it's been used means it's never really done that synergy job. So I think it's underperformed in models because of that. And then it just gets left to the end where there's not enough investment in it in terms of time or thinking or creativity to let it do the same job that those other heavy lifting mediums do.
I think since I started in the industry, I've always been told it's a really good promotional sales driver, but then the ROI never stacked up. So then it wasn't ever really considered as a key channel from that point of view in some cases. And then AV, I think, really shines often and is first thought when it comes to brand. And so then it's kind of just sat in this no man's land where people don't really know how to best use it. And then when you think about big focuses in the industry at the moment, like attention was really built for visual mediums where people could look away from an ad, whereas audio doesn't necessarily have that. And I know Sarah mentioned the Dentsu attention study. Amplified Intelligence haven't figured out how to measure attention on it yet, so then it's just not on any graphs. So then when you're planning, radio is just not considered. So it's just in this kind of funny place.
And in that case too, you kind of go, in the case of podcast, there's no way there can't be massive attention, right? It just, it's there, it's just not measured.
No, you can't. You literally cannot shut off your ears. You can do other things, but you can't shut off your ears, in theory.
There was a study about attention that came out the other day from Karen Nelson Field, who wrote The Attention Economy. I think they presented it at Cannes maybe the other day. And that just focused on AV channels and no radio. It's funny, like hearing Paul talking about his study. He's right that it is a channel that's been around and stayed consistent for so long, but the one we know about the least in a lot of ways because it's not included in studies like that. So it's great that this conversation is happening. I was going to answer your question. I think creatively with radio, there's nowhere really to hide. There's no celebrity faces. There's no high production values. It's a great leveler in a lot of ways. Like you could be Coca-Cola or ANZ or your local chippy, and your opportunities creatively are the same. And it's all about the idea, the hook, and then the craft of the execution. I think it can be tough to get right, I think, but really rewarding when you do. And because it's tough to get right, I think a lot of marketers and agencies either embrace that or shy away from it and then sort of run to the sweet embrace of performance messaging or putting their creative efforts elsewhere.
We might just turn to what Paul talked to. And one of you just mentioned we haven't had a lot of data. And I think that has been a big problem that we've had in this local market. So I'm super excited about this, in part because it's very, very hard data and difficult to argue with. But in part because I think those numbers are fantastic. And reading between the lines, the numbers from McDonald's are going to be fantastic. And I think it all really clearly points to if you do it right, you can drive results out of it. To probably to you three more than to Paul, given how close you are to the business and to the what you do day in, day out, are there things in there that surprise you? Are there, like, what are your sort of takeaways and key things that stand out for you from that data, from that information? Hannah? Yeah. Start with you.
I mean, to be honest, it wasn't surprising because I think personally most of us have some sort of relationship with radio, audio, and I think we've all kind of had this thing in the back of our mind that it actually does work, but we just haven't had the data to back it up. And I think the synergy and thinking synergy, but also intentional synergy, I think is really important. So I think Paul talked about the 1920s, just reading a radio script and then hoping that people would kind of come through to your store or whatever. I think investing in your sonic branding and your distinctive assets in audio, which I think people are getting, brands are getting more and more on board with, but I think there's still quite a wee way to go. And so if there is synergy, it needs to be, synergy in intentional planning, but it also needs to be synergy for a campaign, and planning intentionally, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I think Ash mentioned it in the last panel. She talked about the familiarity and comfort of audio channels. I think that's bang on. Like, there's a real intimacy that comes with audio that you don't get with other channels. Like the hosts of your favorite podcast or radio show feel much like your mates than the hosts of your favorite TV show or YouTubers even. When you're listening to them, you can really imagine yourself sitting around the table, kind of like their weird mate who laughs along but doesn't say anything. So I think, marketers probably are missing a trick. If if they're not looking to put brand-led messaging into these really high trust, highly familiar environments, especially as like content online is increasingly going to go to like this AI fire hose that's coming towards us. Those environments that breed trust and familiarity are just going to be so important. And Paul's results show this, especially when he was talking around the longevity of campaigns. The longer it's in market, the more effective it is. It just shows that radio is that familiarity of radio can be a really powerful tool if used right.
Oh, and I think just with the results, just because we had the test, we were actually talking about radio more than we ever have. So, we were challenging the agencies to think about radio more specifically in the brief. It appeared on more briefs as a kind of challenge. And so the guys, I guess, were thinking about it more specifically and what role it played. And we also pushed back a bit, like Astrid saw a radio script and went, "This is so boring, like, do it again." Which is, when your CMO is actually looking at the radio script as well, it's actually quite cool. But that challenge as well, and working together to just get the best out of the medium and a little bit of freedom for the agencies to use it in ways that we may not have really asked them to use it before. I think that was really good.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think one thing that we did in ANZ, TBWA and PhD was to step away from the briefs. So we had that big session with about 50 people from across the 3 organisations, where we just had a big conversation around setting the standard in audio. Agreed that we had this collective ambition to improve creative excellence in that area. And we all shared what we thought creative excellence in that area looked like, and then agreed on some principles, which were then, credit to all the teams involved, taken through successfully into the more important day-to-day stuff like briefs and creative responses. Radio isn't an afterthought.
I'll drop in one thing, which is 50% ROI improvement. The challenge that we've got constantly, right, is helping our clients improve their performance. 50% to me sounds like, Nigerian prince, I need to, help get me gold out of the country sort of level of improvement, right? 50% is freaking amazing. As a general rule, right, if we're getting 3 to 5% improvements across digital platforms, we think we're doing an awesome job. 50% improvement, it's off the charts, right? It's definitely something I'm going to be chatting with all of my clients in New Zealand about, of how can we do this, because it's a huge lift. And then as that, that obviously then impacts total ROI coming through. But it's a massive opportunity. If I offered any of you a 50% improvement, you'd think that I was a bullshit artist, right? But we've literally seen those results and quantified them. And, not for a non-numerate business, it's for a bank that we've done it in. It's not something where, it's tremendous. It was increasing anyway and, business was booming. It's a mature market with a 50% improvement.
And I think I'd add to that from my memory of it in terms of what that cost. It cost a bit of time and a bit of dialogue from memory. And I look around for someone that actually planned it. There was no more media money went into it really, other than a little bit, but it wasn't significant. So really, you were taking all of the same inputs with a different lens and some spiced up creative, and you get that.
Yeah, exactly. It's
pretty easy.
Right? It's what we do with all of the digital channels. Experimenting, trying to do something different, trying to get better results. It's literally just treating it like everything else.
So sort of picking up on that, and particularly for you three, I presume now you are looking at every single brief differently from a ANZ perspective. And so is that flowing through to behaviour in the agencies and with other clients? What do you think clients need to be doing, and agencies, I guess, to be differently going forward to kind of leverage that benefit into radio?
I'll go. For sure. I think storytelling may be a bit of an overused word, but I'm going to talk about it for a sec, sorry. There's a podcast that I listen to a lot, Adam Morgan, Let's Make This More Interesting. Does anyone know that one? He's the Challenger brand, Eat Big Fish guy. He does this sort of marketing adjacent podcast. It's brilliant. Anyway, on one episode, he has these guys on who are heavily involved in making a lot of the great Nike work that was coming out of Wieden and Kennedy in Portland in the 90s. Some of the most interesting, famous advertising that's ever existed. And they talk about how to create interesting advertising. And two of the components they say are important are related, intrigue and mystery. I think intrigue and mystery is hallmarks of great storytelling. Leaving blanks in the imagination of your audience, letting them sort of be involved. And increasingly TV ads and AV ads, more broadly, don't use mystery and intrigue. Watch your average TV ad these days, and I think you're almost like getting slapped in the face with the brief. And there's no subtlety. Ambiguity is a bit of a dirty word, but radio has that intrigue and mystery kind of built in by its nature. You can't paint the full picture, literally. The audience has to fill in the blanks for themselves, and I think it's such a strength of the medium, from a storytelling perspective, because you leave your reader having been involved. The message has more impact, the story has more impact. So you just need that right hook, and then take the time to craft the execution so that once you got that attention, it's maintained, and then the payoff's great.
Yeah, just to build on storytelling as well, I think thinking about when you, as a consumer, listen to audio, are you lent in, are you lent back? There's different audio mediums for either or. And I think from a storytelling point of view, literally the way that humans survive is by telling stories. So our brains are already wired to lay down those memory structures by just being told a story. So if you think about that, and think about the complex, being able to communicate more complex information. You might, for instance, have an AV ad that might be more entertaining, more humorous, but maybe can't get across all the information, reasons to buy, proof points, etc. But maybe audio can, and thinking about it from that point of view versus maybe if someone's lent back and they're maybe more emotionally kind of engaged, it's how do you also tailor your ads to that as well. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're taking on board the consistency. So the same way that we do plan consistent brand messages with AV and out of home, looking at radio and using that in a more consistent way, as well as just identifying that our, we don't call them jingles anymore, we call them brand sonics, but using our brand sonic, and that's your thread through from your TV right through to the radio, which is, again, quite strong.
Nice. And then creative synergy comes through very, very clearly, and I think probably something that we haven't, from a radio perspective, spent a lot of time, probably thinking about. I think Susie said before, just it hasn't been thought about. For sort of you and Mark, I guess, I presume 100% you would agree from this exercise that agencies need to be spending a lot more time thinking holistically and thinking about creative synergy. What do they need to be doing? Like, how do the media people in this room help the creative agency get to that? How do we stimulate more creative synergy from a output point of view?
Yeah, I think experimenting is one key thing, creatively as well as from a media format point of view, because we do a lot of that in digital. We think we do contextual buys, we do, specific targeting, but thinking about how we use radio in that way as well. So the contextual opportunity, like Mark talked to with the Black Friday moment, that is a moment that's highly retail. It's something that, a lot of retail advertisers are using radio for, so kind of just cracking that formula with the messaging just to juxtapose it a bit. So it's finding that contextual opportunity with radio, finding different ways to use audio, like we're playing around with the 3D audio element that's coming through with digital audio. So again, just using the talent, obviously, which is a major strength. It's like the original influencers. So how do we take some of those shiny things that other digital formats have and just almost, it's kind of almost all sitting there in radio, so use all those elements.
I think from a creative agency point of view, there's probably a bit of nuance in when we talk about creative synergy into radio, because on the one hand, yes, definitely. I think we use a lot of big adjectives in advertising, like we need to revolutionize brand X, but most of the time, actually, your job is just the smaller adjectives like refresh, reinforce those existing memory structures that exist. And radio is amazing for that. Its reliable reach and frequency means that you can refresh and reinforce those memory structures that you're creating elsewhere quite reliably in radio. So definitely, that creative synergy in terms of a messaging and an intent and a strategy needs to be bang on. So you're using radio to its maximum potential. But on the other hand, you need to use every channel to its strengths. If you can't put TV ads on TikTok, then you definitely can't put them on radio. And we see that a lot. Obviously, our TV advertising, our out of home, carry the famous Sharma family. They don't really work so well in radio. So how do we take the same messages and the same intent and use radio to its strengths and come up with executions that deliver those messages in ways that make sense for that channel? So creative synergy, yes, from a sort of strategic and intent and a messaging point of view, and having the teams here sort of overseeing that really helps. But then giving ourselves the freedom to experiment and use those channels, the audio channels, to their strengths.
Clearly help with a client that's encouraging you to
for sure.
to push all of that.
Yeah.
Do you think the creative agencies are more vested in audio now than they were 5 years ago?
No.
How do we change that? Can you go and do that, please? Just go and talk to all of them.
Maybe they are. I mean, I think probably more people in creative agencies are engaging with audio in different ways. I think everything that's been said today about podcasts and the various ways that people are engaging with audio today is really coming through in creative agencies. And I think it exists in pockets, like people who get radio and enjoy writing to radio really set themselves a high standard in that channel and really appreciate the craft. But, I think it's a symptom of the whole ecosystem not taking it seriously enough, whether it's too late on a media plan or clients actually aren't briefing it properly or the agency structures don't value it or creative awards don't value it. I think it's quite a complex problem. But how can you find those bright spots and when radio is done well, make sure that it's really lifted and shows people what the standard is?
And data like this celebrating.
Yeah. The more we can do stuff like this to really understand the value just helps grease the wheels of all those conversations.
Hannah, to you, I know that you are a massive advocate of things audio. Sure. Clearly, landscape, massive change over recent years. How do you and I guess your agency as a whole think about audio from a strategic point of view, media strategy point of view? Where do you see it going? Where do you see the opportunity for agencies?
Yeah, I think there's kind of three ways that we look at it. The first, digital audio is obviously in growth, which is great, but it does make our job a lot more challenging from a reach and frequency point of view. And looking at audio holistically and having a way to holistically plan audio is something that we're looking at. I think as an industry, there's a bit of work to be done in that space, but it's definitely the goal. I mean, the good thing is linear radio still delivers a huge amount of reach, but it's just how can you then kind of expand that. Contextually and aligning with content is something that we always look at as well, and especially with podcasting, there's a really good opportunity in this space to find these little kind of niches. But then also audio, terrestrial radio and digital audio has talent, and that talent is super valuable for us as brands as well, in that, yes, you might integrate or have a partnership with a piece of content or a property or a show, but then it's also thinking about it from an audio out point of view. We know that more people are discovering podcasts on YouTube, but also how can we leverage what we're doing with talent in show, and then expanding it as well and telling the rest of New Zealand.
I'm a little bit conscious of time because we said we're going to get people out. Any closing thoughts from either of you four? One takeaway?
The only one for me, right, is I wasn't paid an absolute cent to do this. The only thing that we're doing is to improve ANZ's performance, which is a client that we've been with for 8 years. So, I wouldn't be risking that relationship for nothing. That 50% improvement is real, and it's something I think sitting there on the table for everybody.
Yeah, and I'll just say, working with Paul, working with these guys, that's where the opportunity came from. So just having really robust discussions with your partners, how you use radio in an integrated way, that would be my key challenge to everyone, to think about that and have those discussions.
And think about it intentionally. What is the role that it's playing on the plan?
one of the things I love about radio is that you feel like you're in two places at once. You know, you could be in the queue at Pack and Save, but then you're also in like an investigation room of a true crime drama at the same time. So I guess think about the context of that and the environments that you're competing with when you're creating radio ads. You're competing with someone doing the gardening or the cooking or whatever. I like to think of it as like, you know, that feeling when you half hear your name said across the room and your ears involuntarily just sort of focus in. How can you make your radio ads sort of have that feeling and command that attention?
Thank you. Is there anything from out there? If anyone got questions?
We can roam.
We can
roam.
Roam away.
This is your last chance
Before
to
you
ask
run
questions and to watch me rock my way across the room.
Oh, God.
Anyone over this side? No takers? Nothing?
If nothing, I'm just again going to say thank you so much to all four of you for today. Thank you, Suze and Paul in particular, for all of the work that's been done behind the scenes to get to that. I think it does. It gives us fantastic sort of foundation to have much more kind of data-based and science-based conversations with clients around using the channel properly to drive results that really make a difference to a client's business, which at the end of the day is the most important thing. So for that, I am really, really thankful, and we look forward to hopefully sharing some more of these sort of bits of data as they come to us over the next 6 months. Thank you.
It's amazing stuff, and just great to finally see, even for us probably as talent that are on air as well, to see conception all the way through to execution, and then obviously having some analytics to back up what it is that we do, because often we are sprinting in the dark and every now and again we get collected by very low branches, which slow us down and make us rethink where we're heading. But to have that laid out in front of us and that laid out in front of all of you, I think is really, really important, just to show the efficacy and the work that is being done. And it just, if you take those risks, if you are brave, if you back the talent, if you back the creative, if you back yourself as a brand, then another data pig can just come on into the trough at the end of it and eat up all those numbers and spit them all out to you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
We need to get out of here. I'm
You're
just
like
gonna,
the uncle at a
I'm just going
wedding.
to say really, really quickly again, thank you so much for coming today. I hope that's been a worthwhile couple of hours, not just because of Jay and Hayley. Hopefully, from today, you'll take away that we still have audience to burn. That our measurement is really consistent and robust, and actually using the channels and the formats that you have available to you in the right way can really make a massive difference to the outcomes for your clients. Thanks again. Thank you to you two. Thank you to the networks for the support, as you were. Thank you.
Great.